Hi, Janine. Welcome to the show. Can you start off with just telling us a little bit about yourself and your background and what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for doing this podcast on growth and connection. And thank you for the opportunity to be here and speak with your audience. I am a champion of growth and connection. It is two of my core values. And the way I'm bringing that into the world right now is by being a business consultant and mindset coach for the architecture and design world. I call them the beauty makers. I was once one myself, and it's really important to me to help these folks have a more joyful, peaceful experience so that they can be more creative and bring that into the world because I feel like beauty is very healing. So that's what I'm on a mission to do.
Well, that sounds interesting. So, what inspired your mission? What got you into this?
My number one core value is beauty, and I like to say beauty with a capital B. If you look at my career, the thread is definitely beauty from when I was a little kid, but in my career, worked in the beauty business. I worked in design, interior design, and now I coach those folks. And so I can't say it's been intentional. It's been kind of a winding path, but everything I feel has led me to this moment, both professionally and personally. For the last 15 years, I've been on a very transformational personal growth path of my own, and I've seen the incredible changes it's brought to my life, and so I want to share that with others. At this point in my life, I feel like being of service is very important. And in fact, there's a book by Father Richard Rohr called Falling Upward that really ignited that in me.
You describe your work as being at the intersection of people, process, and personal growth. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure, I'd love to. So, in practical terms, that means that I help with the operational messiness that can plague a design or architecture firm, and also the human dynamics and messiness sort of on the inside that just comes from being human, right? You get any two humans together, and there's going to be some kind of resistance or conflict or just disagreement. And so I understand both the functional side of the business since I've been a business owner myself. I have an MBA and I understand how to make processes more efficient. And I also understand and have tremendous empathy for the human side of the equation and how to make that more smooth and peaceful and easy. We're not taught this stuff, right? And I've been lucky enough to amass many effective tools in my life that can help people sort of become the best version of themselves. And when we do that, it ripples out to everyone around us. And so, we're complicated beings, and it's fascinating to me that the operating system that we were installed at birth just by being human, our brain and our nervous system, creates patterns and habits of thought and behavior that work against us. I mean, our mind is an incredible asset too. And there's this other side. And, I call this, and a lot of people call this self-sabotage. It negatively impacts our performance, our relationships, and our overall well being or happiness. And I've learned a tool, and I teach it in the class that I have. It's called Positive Intelligence, is the framework that actually installs a new operating system so that we are less stressed, less reactive, less negative, and minimize those sabotaging behaviors.
And where do these sabotaging behaviors come from? How do people, it sounds like everyone kind of has them to some extent. So
Yes.
how do people pick those up?
If you are human, you have them. And I am not a neuroscientist, but I've studied a bit and I read a lot and listen to a lot of podcasts. And, you can listen to some neuroscientists and it'll back this up. There's something called the negativity bias in the human brain. And this was developed for survival reasons. You've probably heard of the survival brain. And that is that our brain is always scanning for like what's wrong, what's potentially dangerous, who's the threat, what's bad out there, because my survival depends on it. And we do that 3 to 1. So I don't know, have you ever noticed that either you notice about yourself or someone else, like, gee, they're always finding the negative, they're always looking at the negative, or I'm always focused on my partner is so great, but I always come back to what might be annoying or negative. Well, that's your survival brain. And it worked great when we were evolving, when we literally had to run away from tigers and whatever other, threats were out there. Um, Now we don't quite need it so much, but it's there. And so that's really the root of our sabotaging behavior. The good news about it is that the root, so that's the fuel to the sabotaging behavior. The root of it, your sabotaging behavior, is actually usually your greatest strength. So if you have a people pleasing tendency, the root of that is that you care. You're a peacemaker and want people to be happy, and those are beautiful qualities. What happens when that survival brain gets involved is that it flips. It gets so blown out of proportion that it flips into a negative. And maybe you're always saying yes when you mean no, or you don't have great, boundaries about clients calling you, at 7 a.m. on a Sunday and you pick up the phone. So that's kind of a mini neuroscience lessons of why and how we self-sabotage.
Okay, that definitely makes sense. So I have some neuroscience background, and that's definitely
All
true.
right.
That is how we see things day to day, because that's we wouldn't be here otherwise.
All right. We
So
have instant fact checking. I love it.
absolutely. So you work mostly with creatives, and so when these people go into that space, their work, their career, that's what drives them, pulls them into it, the creativity. Obviously, part of that is managing and running a business, and so
Yeah,
some of those types of people struggle with that, or find that aspect of their jobs stressful. So, are there common themes and struggles that you see working with these types of people?
absolutely, Igor. It's true. Many design professionals in your design education, you don't get a business class, or maybe you have one semester, or don't take business classes in general. And folks can find it overwhelming and burdensome, and that can really crush creativity and the joy of working, right? Also, what I hear is people telling themselves the story of, oh, because I'm a creative, I can't do business. And that's really a mindset trap, and equally as powerful and destructive. And of course, we all have strengths and weaknesses, but education can go a long way. The most common sabotaging habits I see in creatives and the folks I work with are that people pleasing I mentioned, not being able to say no when you really mean it. Perfectionism is a big one. Putting, the majority of their effort and energy on the thing or things that aren't as critical, or not heeding deadlines because, they want to get it perfect, which perfectionism really doesn't exist. And also procrastination, that avoiding of important tasks or difficult conversations or conflict. And I go deep into each of these. There's actually 10 ways we self-sabotage, and we go deep into these in the master class that I teach. With each person, get specific tips and tools on how to deal with like their personal brand of sabotage.
So it seems like this self-sabotage is something that, as we just discussed, we innately do. And so a lot of the time, we're not even aware that we're really doing it, but it's going on. And so, how does someone become aware of that? And how do, the clients that you work with, I would almost say that you have to be a certain threshold of self-awareness of these type of detrimental behaviors to even come to you, right? And so when
Absolutely.
clients do come to you, what are the first kind of steps, or what are the first things that you walk them through to
Mhm.
work through some of these self-sabotaging behaviors and the struggles that they're having?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And hey, I'm not exempt. I didn't really become self-aware until around 45 years old. So, it's not shaming or blaming anyone to say that we're not even aware. I think of two things. One is like if you're self-reflective or you want to understand what you're bringing to the table, maybe you don't have off the rails self-sabotage, but there are some things you do that are holding you back a little bit. Um, think about the patterns in your life and relationships and jobs, and if there's certain types of situations or feedback you get that keep repeating, guess what? There's probably a pattern there, and you can journal about it. You can talk to someone you trust, whether that's a mentor, a clergy person, a coach. And if you're really brave, you can ask folks you trust and who are close to you. It could be family, it could be a partner, it could be a colleague. What do you see as my gifts, but also what do you see as like patterns that might be holding me back? Um, and so, again, this is the human condition. And the first thing I do, even with potential clients, is there's a saboteur assessment through positive intelligence that one can take. And I think we're going to link that in the show notes. It's a short assessment, and folks are never surprised by their results. I mean, usually we kind of know. And so that can be a first step in opening a conversation. And I would say, this work isn't for wimps. It takes some bravery. It takes a bunch of humility. It takes empathy for yourself. But that awareness is the first step, and that's where we can start from.
You just described sort of the process where an individual can start, but you work with individuals and with teams. So how does the process differ if you're working with an individual versus when you're working with a team?
That's a really good question. I think it always starts with the individual because the team is made up of people. And once I like to get, whether it's just the leaders or the leaders in their team, I like to get everybody versed in this, in the vocabulary of self-sabotage and the way, I teach it or come at it. And then we can have a conversation about what's going on in the organization. I mean, I often can see it, when you're not in it every day, you can recognize some of the patterns. And though it's much more powerful if people can come to it themselves. And so, I'll do facilitated team meetings. And just once we've established that vocabulary and a certain level of trust among everybody that they can speak freely and no one's going to get in trouble or get bent out of shape, then we can start talking about the organism itself of the team or the company and the culture.
Do you find it difficult to get to a certain level of trust when you're working with teams? Because, if it's in a work setting or work environment, I would imagine individuals have difficulty, admitting to some of our self-sabotaging behaviors if it's in a group setting around your colleagues.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, vulnerability is the currency of trust, right? And so it starts with me as the person presenting this idea to people. And then usually I will take the leaders might go through the training first, and really one of the core sort of superpowers it builds, that's the antithesis of this survival brain, is what we call the sage. And the number one power of the sage that is greatly lacking in business and goes a really long way is empathy. And so empathy is, that I understand you. I may not agree with it. I may not like what you're doing, but I get it. You have these saboteurs too. So do I. So empathy goes a long way. And like I said, that vulnerability, if folks see me being vulnerable, their leaders going, oh yeah, I've got, the controller and the avoider, and this is how it shows up for me, that kind of gives permission for people to open up. Now, I can't guarantee that every single person is going to be 100% honest and, off the bat. But what we invite people to do is to be 10% more vulnerable than they normally would be. Because honestly, vulnerability for some people is really scary. And talk about your survivor coming out, because we don't know what they've experienced in their life. And for a lot of people, being honest and vulnerable maybe was even dangerous. And so, share 10% more than you normally would. But I introduced the topic of the saboteurs. It's always reassuring people that this is the human condition and try to bring some lightness and play to it, because that's another power of our wiser self. That sage is like playfulness and lightness and joy and not taking it so seriously.
You drew on neuroscience to explain the self-sabotage bias that we all have. Do you also utilize neuroscience concepts to steer your clients away from the self-sabotaging behaviors that they may have? And
Yeah, I would say that. So, the positive intelligence framework, first of all, the gentleman who created it used the latest findings of neuroscience, positive psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, and performance science. So, he did all the hard work and, teaches coaches how to teach his framework. I would say yes, the ultimate goal is to lessen the sabotaging behaviors. However, it's not done by like judging, the judge is the master saboteur. It's not done by judging, oh, that behavior is bad and I never want to see those behaviors again, because your brain's your brain and the saboteurs aren't going anywhere. So it's more of like becoming aware of it, accepting the fact that, oh, this is what I do because I'm human and I have these patterns, and then taking action from there of learning tools. And there's actually just a simple 4-step process that walks you through how to shift your reaction or your response, and is also at the same time there's these simple sensory activities you can do that help rewire your. They actually hooked people up to functional MRI machines while they were doing these exercises. And it's really just tuning into one of your senses, like really putting all your focus on a tactile sensation, or your hearing, or, feeling your feet on the ground, or watching your breath. But on the functional MRI machine, the survival brain, part of your brain, quieted down or got darker, and these other areas fired up. That's, these areas that are known to be this more higher, wiser, sage part of your brain. Pretty cool. And it's really effective. So there is a practice that goes with it, because there's no magic pill for anything. Like if you were wanted to pick up guitar, you're going to have to practice a lot, right? Or if you're in a new job, you're going to have a learning curve. Or if you go to the gym and you want to get stronger, you can't go for 3 months and then quit. This is actually a practice that you do daily. And much like the gym, over time, that period of taking a pause before you respond can get longer and longer and longer, because immediately, we react to things because the judge goes, oh, this is bad, that person's bad, I did something bad, the circumstances are bad, and then it's like we're off to the races. So I teach a daily practice.
what if someone is, not working with you? And what if someone is, especially a creative person, struggling with being overwhelmed and burnt out?
Yeah.
What would you recommend are some small things or some things that they can start with to relieve some of that
Yeah.
tension that they have internally?
Yeah. Okay, I got so many recommendations. So get out your pen and pencils. Some of these are more abstract, and some of them are just very practical tools and tips. So I highly recommend some sort of a morning practice that before you pick up your phone, please, and maybe even before you get out of bed, just take 5 minutes and sit there and be still. And you can watch, your thoughts might start running. You can these exercises I was talking about, like just focusing on a sense, just try and listen to your breathing for 5 minutes, maybe touch, your bed sheets and really focus on what that feels like. Just take 5 minutes to yourself before hitting the treadmill. So that's number 1. That I recommend to everybody and anybody. The saboteurs, usually how you know you're kind of getting hijacked by them is some kind of negative emotion. So, anger, fear, worry, disappointment, regret, resentment, pick one, shame. Think of that as your warning signal that, oh, I'm getting hijacked by a saboteur. You don't even have to know which one, doesn't matter. So notice yourself. If you're really tuned into your body, sometimes that can have a physical sensation, like maybe you're tight, or maybe you have a pit in your stomach, or maybe you're clenching your jaw. But look for those negative emotions as a signal that you're getting hijacked by a saboteur, and then get into your body. Like, take a breath, rub your two fingertips together. I keep doing this, and that one of the exercises is to rub your fingertips together and focus on it so intently that you can feel the ridges on both fingers. Once you're focused on your body, your mind can't, like, both can't happen at once. So I would take that beat and try to stop the thinking. And then the crux of this positive intelligence framework and of shifting your mindset is that any situation that we, might label bad or not good, or circumstance, can be turned into a gift or an opportunity. And I can tell you this, and you might want to try and practice it. It's harder said than done unless you've had some repetition of it. But just, it's called the sage perspective in our thing. But it's shifting that, like, oh, we lost the project. Like, you might think it's the end. Your judge is going to tell you it's the end of the world. But maybe there's something you can get out of losing a project that you can improve on and do better next time. Maybe there's some gift of knowledge, that you can amass. And for little things, it can be easy to do that in the moment. For really big, important things, it takes a little bit longer to recognize that gift. But that is a mindset shift. Like, just tell yourself and remind yourself of a time when you thought something was really bad and it ended up not being so bad, or actually ended up being great. And then just some practical tools, working with that 3-to-1 negativity bias. If it's about a person or a circumstance and you're finding yourself having negative thoughts about it, stop yourself and come up with 3 positive thoughts. So to counterbalance the 3 negative, to at least make it a neutral thing. Or if you're like, oh, Bob always annoys the heck out of me, think about, well, Bob has, pretty nice blue eyes, and Bob is a kind person, and Bob, always has a smile on his face. I don't know. Those thoughts will kind of get you out of that negative loop, because that loop will keep kind of going. It's a downward spiral. What else are some of my favorite sort of in the moment tools? I love the 3-to-1, the stopping and getting into your body. Make someone happy. Put a smile on your face. It sounds hokey, but you feel different when you're smiling. Oh, another one is like, get into a position of like strength or power or exuberance. Like, the V for victory is one of them. I mean, it's just known. It just changes your perspective on things. Get up and do a 1-song dance party. That's another one of my very favorite tools. It's not part of positive intelligence, but moving your body and just breaking up you got to get out of that loop.
Yeah, one thing that goes along with what you just said is I've heard before someone tell me, and it really stuck with me, is that your feelings don't always matter. And this was maybe geared towards men. I'm not sure, because maybe women and men experience feelings differently. But what I heard is someone was telling me your feelings don't matter. Your actions cause your feelings. So if
Yes.
you're afraid, if you're hesitating, if you're overthinking something, just do it, and then you'll feel different about it. If you're
Yes.
feeling sad, put on some music and dance. and you're going to feel better, right? So as much as feelings comprise our a large part of our everyday experience, our actions are the things that pave the way for feelings a lot of the time and give rise to feelings. And so if we want to change the way we feel, we need to take action, whether that's dancing or anything
Mhm.
else.
Yeah. No, I love it. You're absolutely right. One of my favorite sort of unofficial mentors, because I don't know him, but I love his podcast, is Rich Roll. And he's always talking about mood follows action. That we so often think, oh, I have to figure this out and think about it until I know the right answer. And it's like, no, just take some kind of action. Clarity comes through action. It can also be a diversionary tactic. To this is very useful in many ways, but it can also get us off track. And one thing I would say is even a feeling is just a feeling, right? It's kind of the meaning, we attach meaning to it a lot of the time. Like, oh, I'm really disappointed. Okay, that might mean that person's a jerk, or disappointment is bad, or, we tell ourselves a story about the feeling, and that kind of creates our reality as well. How do you break yourself from either feeling overwhelmed or yucky?
Well, usually I'm a big proponent of exercise. So if I had a rough day or something like that, I know that even sometimes when I don't want to go and have a workout or do some training, I train jujitsu. Even
Mm,
if I don't want to go, I always know that when I'm there, I'll start feeling a little bit better. But then afterwards, not only do I feel better, but it's like a change in consciousness that occurs. And then I can reflect on what it was that happened that pulled me down earlier in the day, and
yeah.
it's always like a different perspective and a more positive perspective. So that's a big one. And but if it's a smaller thing, then I can't leave to go to the gym right away. I don't dance, that I'm willing to admit, but I do put on music that I like, and
Huh?
that always changes my mindset as well, because it's like an emotional driver. Music is very
Yeah,
emotional. So those
absolutely.
are my ways.
I love it. So you're leaving it on the mat with the jujitsu. And if we can even remember the thing we were upset about, right? So often it's like, oh, what was, it wasn't even that big of a deal. Or think about it in a week. Am I even going to remember what I'm, obsessing over or upset about? Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on the show, Janine, and sharing your wisdom and sharing, what you do and how you do it. If someone wants to contact you,
Hmm.
can you tell us how they can do it? And then I will also put all of your contact info underneath the video as well.
Absolutely. Yes, I would love to hear from your listeners. I love even just connecting with folks and hearing what's up. My website is yes2yum.com. I am on LinkedIn at Janine-Aurichio and Instagram at yes2yum. Also, YouTube at Janine Aurichio Y to Y. And this class I've been talking about, I run it usually 3 times a year, January, April, and September. And I'm offering your listeners a 10% discount on the April pod. It's a small group class, and also I think you'll share a link of how folks can get on my calendar if they want to learn more about that. So thank you so much for this opportunity. It's obviously one of my favorite things to talk about.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for the information and the discount to your class, and we will end it here.
Fantastic. Thank you.